When the largest human-created explosion prior to the atomic bomb flattened Halifax, Nova Scotia on a winter day in 1917, volunteers arrived to help from all directions and distances. Within 2 days, a train had traveled from Boston to Halifax with supplies, nurses, and physicians, as well as Red Cross volunteers. Back in Boston, volunteers were holding concerts to raise funds and collect supplies. In the darkest moment for one of Canada's largest cities at the time, Boston led the way, with American cities following by volunteering to support efforts from Philadelphia to Washington. While over 1,600 homes were gone, along with 2,000 residents killed, Halifax would rebuild, and Nova Scotia would be thankful for generations. Decades later, on the darkest day in the United States, several thousand passengers and crew were stranded after all planes were grounded on 9/11. The planes lining the runway had more people than the nearby town. Heidi Sato said, "If you don't care who gets credit, a lot of work will get done." The residents of Gander, Newfoundland stepped up. Volunteers transported, housed, fed, and entertained everyone for the next week until they could safely fly home. As the refugees returned to their planes, they began sharing stories that are now featured in the Broadway play Come From Away. Back in Boston, the best tree arrives every year for Christmas, specially picked as the best tree available. It is the gift for the people of Massachusetts from Nova Scotians for helping them decades earlier. Volunteers are where legends are made. On this episode, I'm happy to welcome volunteer management strategist Karen Knight as my guest on the Wildfires, Floods, and Chaos Communications podcast. I'm your host, Tim Conrad, and press button. Hello, Karen. Good to have you. And my first question for you is, tell me about the most significant challenges you hear about today when managing volunteers, whether you're doing that in a paid or a volunteer role.
Hey. Hi, Tim. It's nice to be on. Probably the question that comes up the most often is, where do I find more volunteers? People are struggling, especially since COVID. People are wanting to volunteer in different ways. You hear a lot about people saying, oh, people don't want to volunteer anymore. That's not true. People still care about their causes, but they want to be engaged in different ways now. And if they don't see that, what they're looking for in what you're asking for, they'll avoid you. So it seems like there's not as many, but there are. They're out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, I mean, disasters and emergencies are heavily reliant on volunteers here in Canada and throughout much of the world. So what should those managing volunteers during emergencies consider to ensure that they remain healthy during disasters? Because it's challenging for people working any emergency, disaster, or any, for that matter, anything that's really kind of high stress.
Right. I've written a couple articles around volunteer fatigue and burnout and things like that. It's so easy for volunteers to get caught up in what they're doing and go far beyond what they're really capable of. People will push past their limits when they shouldn't. And I think one of the key roles for a leader of volunteers is to think about that and keep an eye on your volunteers. Find out when you see them starting to go beyond their limits, because they'll push through because they don't want to this is important to them, so they want to keep going and going and going. You have to be the one to say, no, you need a break now. It's time for you to go home, come back tomorrow fresh, or sit down, have a drink of water and just relax for 10 minutes, right? If you keep on top of that, you'll prevent a lot of the burnout, because they'll push themselves far beyond their limits, and then you don't have them after that for weeks sometimes. So just
Mm-hmm.
keep a close eye on them.
Yeah, and so do you have any suggestions for like how to do that? One of the emergencies I worked at a few years ago, one of the volunteers that was kind of checking in on us like that would come around and they had a bag of treats essentially, so goodies that you could eat, and they were just using that as a gateway to start a conversation. So any thoughts around that?
Yeah, a lot of it, and it's harder in emergency situations where you're getting a lot of volunteers and you don't have established relationships with each of them because they're new. They come in just for this thing because it's happening in their community. But trying to build some form of relationship, some sort of rapport with each of the volunteers so you can start to do that. I love the idea of going around with a bag of candy or something and just getting that kind of conversation going. And if you, as the leader of volunteers, are swamped, delegate. Be willing to delegate to someone else. I see this a lot where somebody has a whole bunch of skills, but the leader of volunteers doesn't realize what skills they have. So they have them doing some menial work. There's a story. I was working with an organization, and one of the things they needed was to redo their volunteer webpage. And they said, well, we'll have to put it off. We have to get a grant and get this all because we can't afford to hire someone. Well, one of the people stuffing envelopes for them was a web designer, and they didn't know it. And once we connected, because part of what I do when I go into an organization is I interview staff and handfuls of volunteers just to get an idea. And I found out about this. I said, do you know that they're looking for this? And I said, did you know that you have someone on the team already who's good at this and willing to do it for you? Right? So the better you know your volunteers, the better you can use their skills and take your impact that much further. It's amazing what people don't know about the volunteers on their team.
Yeah, that's right. It's sometimes easy to make that assumption about somebody, off of a first impression maybe or something like that, that this
It's
person is
free
this, and
labor,
not
therefore
realizing.
they can't be very good at anything.
Yeah,
Right? If they're working for free, they can't be too terribly talented. But this is
yeah.
not the case.
Not at all, right? It's yeah, I a number of years ago, I sat down at an event to recognize volunteers and was sitting across from this fellow and struck up a conversation with him, had a great conversation with him, and learned that he's into fossils and collected crystals and was very creative and all these sorts of things. Ended up he was the volunteer of the year that year. I didn't realize that he was the one being recognized because I was new to that community. And
Right.
not only that, but he had been the president of a large forestry company. So he was a very talented guy in a lot of ways. And it was just fascinating listening to his path through volunteerism over the years. So you
Right.
never
Right.
know.
You never know. I know Supreme Court judges who are volunteers. I mean, you don't know what you've got until you build a relationship with people. And like just what you did, just sit down and have a conversation with them. Find out what's going on. I know during crises, everybody's busy and everybody's stretched thin. But you need to rest too. Take that time to just sit and have a conversation with one or two of the others that are resting.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's, certainly, I mean, I'm out there, I'm working, I'm a paid worker when I'm out there, but I always take those time to sit down, and I love times sitting with the volunteers and spending time with them. And that is time off for me in those
Yeah.
moments, just having those conversations with them about whatever is on their mind.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, like, volunteers serve in a lot of key roles during emergencies. Firefighters in many communities have been volunteers for hundreds of years. Emergency support services here in British Columbia, those are the people that help line up accommodations, medical, and other supports for evacuees. Organizations like Team Rubicon, Samaritan's Purse, St. John Ambulance, the Red Cross may arrive with teams of volunteers. So it's easy to keep volunteers engaged during emergencies, but there's often too much work being done by too few. And sometimes that means some volunteers have almost no work. So what can you give them for advice to kind of know how to chop up that work and ensure that you've given some good hints already, but what are some other tips that you can give in those situations?
Work on your volunteer roles. Look at take all the different things that need to be done during an event and look at the ones that are really standalone tasks that we just need this done. Those are great for people who just walk in and say, "Can I help?" And you say, "Yeah, we need the garbage taken out," right? You can just do little things like that. But for the bigger roles, and I've seen so many volunteers just like the ones you're talking about. I'll do that. I'll do that. I'll do that. And they're so passionate. They want to do everything. But if you write your volunteer role descriptions in such a way that there are set boundaries, these are what you are responsible for, and these are what other people are responsible for, and then enforce that. Say, we
Mm-hmm.
have someone else here to do that. Thanks, Mary. I really appreciate it. But I think you can get more done if you focus on your tasks, right? And because, yeah, having people stand around doing nothing, they get so frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard. And again, it leads to that burnout that we were talking about before. If somebody tries to take on more and more and more. And there's a little bit, I don't know how often it happens, but there's a little bit of empire building. There's a little bit of, I want control of things, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
nodding. You've probably seen things like that. Volunteers aren't exempt from that kind of
Yeah.
desire to have control over things. So you have to be watchful of it and make sure that there are set boundaries in the tasks and roles that you give, and that'll help ease some of that. Won't ease it all because there will always be people like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sooner you can jump on them, the less damage they do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, just on that note, I mean, one thing that I've come across a number of times is those people that do, certainly grab everything that they can, and they have, they want to control it. I've had a belief that in most volunteer roles, you should stay in them at most for 3 to 5 years and then move into a different role and give somebody else different view, new opportunities. What does it do for an organization and for people? Like when you have those breaks and those opportunities to do a different role?
Tons of benefit throughout. And even if you are staying in one role, okay, you can still cross train into other roles. There's all sorts of ways of doing it, but a lot of volunteers, you do get bored after a while. You know something inside out and backwards, and yeah, it's great and you're really good at it. But learn other things as well, just to keep yourself fresh. And by switching people in their roles, you get people with different worldviews in there, and people who may see barriers that aren't there for you, but are there for other people. But nobody would have known about it if it was always that one person in that role. So the
Mm-hmm.
more you can switch things up, not constantly, of course, people do need to feel confident and competent in their roles. And you need, like you said, 2 or 3 or 4 years in a role to become that. But the more fresh blood, if you like, that gets in, the stronger
Mm-hmm.
the entire organization becomes, because you get new ideas and new viewpoints and new enthusiasm. And yeah, sometimes someone coming in for the first time will make mistakes, and that's okay. It's how people learn. So long as they aren't life-threatening mistakes, they can be fixed, right? And I think that's a lot of the reason why some of these people who try and hold on to things, they don't want mistakes made, right? And they don't want to have problems. But there will always be mistakes and there will always be problems. And it's how, like I said, it's how we learn, is by making these
Mm-hmm.
mistakes and learning from them so we become better.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
switching around is always amazing.
Yeah, and mistakes are opportunities, right? They're opportunities for growth for the person, for the organization, for that task that's being done, and
And
yeah, I think it's important.
it also gives you an indication, you as a leader of volunteers, it gives you an indication of where your training may be falling down. If you bring someone new in and new people consistently make the same mistake, you need to look at your training in that area. Whereas if you
Hmm.
keep one person in, you'd never know that, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I think the biggest mistakes that you can make is staying in a role for 10 or 15 years because nobody else has had the opportunity to do that role, and
Right.
then when you go to leave, there's a big gap for them to fill. So you need to have people come through so that there is an opportunity to continue that role and continue that for that organization. I've actually seen nonprofits collapse because of poor volunteer management. I'm sure you've heard of that in your
Yes, lots. And I'm often brought on at the verge of collapse saying, okay, we're having problems. What do we do? And I'm going, God, I wish you brought me in a year or two ago. But
yeah.
a lot of that too can be resolved because there's so much knowledge that people keep in their heads. But if you build in succession planning, so somebody's been in this role for 3 years, they've got it aced. Hey, can you mentor someone else? And you don't need to say, because we're going to replace you. You can say, for when you go on holidays, or if you get injured or sick or whatever, we'd have a backup. And you train them because you know this, right? And then it makes them feel good because they still feel like they're important, but
Hmm.
somebody else has that knowledge too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that protects your organization.
I really want to thank listeners and viewers out there for sticking with us as we navigated some difficult moments over the last year. Unfortunately, we've lost a bit of our momentum and are looking for a bit of help as we produce episodes. If you could share with someone in emergency services, or public relations, we'd love that. If you could suggest a guest at communicationspodcast.com or drop a review, we'd really love that too. We have some really cool ideas for the podcast we're working on for the next year, so hang around. We're joining listeners in over 50 countries now, in over 500 communities globally. Heck yeah, I just am blown away by that. This includes listeners in the country of Andorra, along with people in these communities: Minneapolis, Minnesota, Coon, India, Dubai, United Arab Emirates, Val-d'Or, Quebec, and Taronga, New Zealand. We're here, we're talking about crisis and we're talking about emergencies, and that's critical in this environment. So it's so important for people to get more opportunity to see, and we should be rotating people around so they know lots of different roles in volunteer organizations so that you can step into wherever you need to be for that particular moment, because not everybody's going to be available in an emergency
Exactly.
for that particular thing, for that particular time
Yeah.
to do that job, right? So yeah. So I was working an emergency preparedness engagement project a few years ago, and I fell across a woman with a neat story. So years earlier, she had been evacuated and was waiting in line for one of the services at an evacuation center. And as she stood there, slowly moving along in this line, she said it was very much crawling. She realized that she had all of the necessary skills to help people in that moment. So she stepped out of the line and went behind the desk. So I don't want to promote to people thinking that she was just jumping the line and this is the way that you can jump the line, because when you get into a role like that, you're expected to be there for days or weeks and
Right.
some long hours, right? So
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I was intrigued that she took it a step further. She instantly became the volunteer recruiter. She learned about what was needed to be done and assigned people to the work who had skills that matched, that were in the same line that she was.
Right. Right.
So, and within a short time, there was no lineup. They had cleared the lineup, and the mood in the room had improved from being fairly tense
Mhm.
to being fairly happy, and people were getting along. So, what kind of lessons
People
can,
felt that they had more
yeah,
control.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
they're a part of the part of the process, right? So, what kind of lessons can we learn from this story or others that you may have?
Wow. That's a great story. I love that. And it isn't the first time I've heard that. I've heard of people coming to food banks, for example, because they need groceries and things are chaotic or someone didn't show up. So they help and then they end up volunteering long term, right? It's one of the things that I think is most valuable and often forgotten about is the lived experience of volunteers can really make a massive difference. If people really understand where the people that you're serving are from or in at that time, it can make such a difference in how those clients feel because they know that the people helping them are the ones have been in the same situation, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Bringing in people with lived experience and getting them to help really makes a huge difference in the comfort that the people you're serving have toward what's happening to them. They feel safer if the people that are helping them have been through this themselves.
yeah,
They
yeah,
know people aren't just saying yes, pat you on the head and send you on your way type thing. They've been
yeah.
there, they've lived it. So if you can find the people who have done it themselves and who are willing to help, and I've found people who have been through that themselves are more willing to help, then
Hmm.
then you have a stronger team. Like you said, the feeling in the room gets better because people feel that the people behind the desk know what's going on.
So, obviously, we want to have people like her. She comes in, she joins a team. Those are great you get into the team. But there's other people that, whether an event happens and whether it's an emergency or crisis, they decide to do their own thing. And sometimes they'll get together with other people and do a solo act. And uh, so they're independently going out there and doing stuff that, yes, may be helping, but it's not part of the larger team. So what should we keep in mind with folks that do that? And how can we encourage them to be volunteers, but in the larger group?
There were all sorts of news articles about this with the Texas flooding incident a few months back, where people would be going out and searching without knowing that that official searchers weren't in there for a reason, because there was more water coming down and the area was unsafe or whatever. People tend to get really frustrated. They want to help, and they want to help now. So if they know that if they have to go through the official teams, but they need to take a week's worth of training and they have to get all their gear and sign all these waivers and do all this, and it could be a week and a half before they help, they won't bother. They'll go straight out and do things themselves, which ends up in so many cases to be a detriment. They put themselves in danger. They put other people in danger. They add to the number of victims rather than saving things. A lot of organizations feel that there is a need for a lot of training and a lot of hoops to have people jump through before they can help. If at all possible, streamline that to the absolute minimum, because otherwise you will have people going out and doing it themselves, whether that's staying in an evacuation area to protect their own home with a hose, or whether it's going out and searching for people and getting in the way of the people who are trying to do it and have all the knowledge and all the facts at their fingertips. You need to make it as quick as possible to get people out there doing things. If you do need training, like if it is a necessary thing, what else can they do in the meantime while they're taking that training to keep them engaged and make them feel like they're being helpful while still protecting them and getting their training in place? Yeah, you can't expect people who see their neighborhood start to wash away to just sit quietly and say, okay, I'll go through a week's training and then do that. It doesn't work. And unfortunately, so many of these things are, an emergency is an unexpected event. So people don't think to go and get their training beforehand, because how did they know they'd need it, right? So if you can streamline the hoops, or remove as many of the hoops and barriers to getting people out there as quickly as possible, you'll have a lot less problem with people trying to do things themselves and getting in the way.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think that's really important, that we do need to look at our organizations and what we're requiring of volunteers before they even do anything.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely heard of that. I've heard of one organization recently that 2 weeks of training and process and things to go through before you even did anything. And the job was not that complex. I'm like, what do you possibly need to go through for 2 weeks to be able to do this job?
Exactly.
And so it was quite a bit. So be careful. I often say this as a communicator: don't let the lawyers get too much of a grip on things. You need to function. Yeah. So yes, you need to cover liability, but you need to function, and that's more important, that you function. If you're not functioning, you're creating another liability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Make sure
and
that that's still happening.
so if you've got an emergency and you don't want people going out and searching, well, help get them in there helping hand out food or water or doing other smaller things until they're ready to go out there searching, right? Just have something else to do. Get them involved immediately, even if it's in a background role, just so they feel like they're actually doing something.
Yeah, agreed. And just going back to the story I told earlier, I just find it so fascinating how she talked about evacuees becoming volunteers, that much of their stress went away when they weren't sitting there and stewing over what if scenarios. So this is a case where volunteering can reduce stress.
It is
And you don't
always
hear that too often.
You do in the volunteering sector. It is
Right?
one of the keys of volunteering. No matter what you do, whatever your volunteering is, it is a huge benefit to people's mental health to help volunteer. If you're volunteering in an area where you have lived experience, it gives you a sense of control. If you're volunteering for a conservation organization, for example, doing that will help reduce eco-anxiety. If you're helping with seniors, that fear of getting older goes away, right? All just helping in whatever way, just helping other people can lower your stress level. Just that.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
it's amazing. The research that's been done around the mental health benefits of volunteering, I mean, there's stacks and stacks of studies that prove that this happens every time. Even just small bits, like you don't have to sign up to volunteer at a place for an hour a week for the rest of your life. You help somebody for 10, 15 minutes and all of a sudden you feel better,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
instant.
Yeah.
And I was reading a study. I'm trying to remember what it's called, and I should have had it written down. It's not only you who gets the benefit of, or it starts off. It's not just the person you're helping who gets the benefit. You get the benefit from that hit of dopamine or whatever that comes out from helping people. But people who see you helping others feel better because of it. I mean, I don't know what the
Hmm.
medical reason is, but they start to think, maybe the world isn't such a bad place because there are people out there helping others,
Yeah.
right? And that leads
Yeah.
them to being more likely to help others themselves. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, and that the thing I said earlier about volunteer being stressful is something I hear from people that aren't volunteering. And I've always been a volunteer, and so I've always found it very good for my soul, and it
Yes.
helps make me feel better. And yeah, there's some ups and downs in it, but I have to say it's been way better than any job I've ever worked. And I've enjoyed, helping out folks and just experiencing what that's like
Yeah.
firsthand and just being there with it.
Yeah, no, I first started volunteering when I was about 11 years old. And my family was never a volunteering family. It wasn't something that was done there. But I was visiting my grandmother in her care home, and the person who called bingo that day couldn't make it. And so everybody was down and everybody was upset because the people who like bingo didn't want to call it because then they couldn't play. And the
That's
people
right.
who didn't like bingo didn't want anything to do with it. So I said, well, all you have to do is just sit here and read these numbers off the balls, right? So I called bingo one afternoon. I was 11 years old. And people were so thankful. And they gave me hugs and kisses and cookies and candy. And I'm thinking, this volunteering thing, this is a good deal.
Pretty good
And
deal.
so that just started, it just started me on a lifelong journey of volunteering. So I've volunteered ever
That's
since
awesome.
then.
Yeah. That's great. I now started volunteering young too, and through as a firefighter, I had a bingo experience. I had to fill in for bingo one time. I was a bit older, and I remember pulling the bingo number out, and I called it wrong the first time. It was a curling rink, and it was full, packed full, and the grumbles I got, I thought I was going to get kicked out of the place for calling the wrong number because of course they're tapping their numbers down and what, and it was like, oh, geez,
Oh my God.
yeah, but they were still thankful at the end of the night. So, but
Yeah, you don't have to be perfect to be a volunteer.
no, there's a little bit more give when you can say you're a volunteer. So,
Yeah,
yeah, and so that time as a firefighter, it was really interesting, and I've probably met thousands of people that started as a volunteer, and then eventually that turned into a career of
right.
some sorts. Lots that I know of have gone on to be emergency responders of some type from firefighting. Can you give other examples of how volunteer roles are in shaping a life path?
A lot of students, university, college students, they want those volunteer hours because it looks good on their resume, right? They get experience doing whatever. If they're studying geriatrics and they volunteer in a hospice, or if they volunteer with kids and they're schooling or what, like
Hmm.
becoming a teacher. All of this helps. But even if it's not something directly related to where your future career is, just the fact that you're out there volunteering looks good, and it grows your network, and the more people you know, the more likely you'll get the job you want, even if it's not in the same area. It's amazing the number of jobs that people have found because they've been volunteering, whether through the network or however. Just the fact that they've been doing it is huge. And a lot of them have done have changed their careers. This is the area I want to go in. So they go and volunteer in that area and they think, no, you know something? I don't think I can do this. Right. So
Hmm.
you get people reevaluating their career paths too, because they have actual hands-on experience in that area. So it's interesting what it can do. They find, maybe I like doing this better. Maybe I'll switch careers. I've seen that happen over and over again. It's
Yeah.
neat. It's neat to watch how people's lives change because of volunteering.
Yeah. And the fellow I mentioned earlier with the forestry business guy that was
Mhm.
the volunteer, he sucked me into volunteering, and
To it.
I helped. Yeah, he did. He didn't give me a right there at that day. I didn't realize it, but he had gotten me. I went over to see him at his house, saw his fossil collection, and while I was there, he sucked me into a role with this building a dinosaur museum. But that here's a crazy career path for you. Eventually, I ended up helping to host media and celebrities that came to help build this museum, and one of them was Dan Aykroyd. And the outcome of that was Dan Aykroyd came to my house for a visit at one point in time, and it was like, how is this even possible, right? Like, and it was like through volunteering of all things, right? So
You never
very
know where it'll
strange.
take
You
you or
never know,
who you'll meet. That's so
right?
cool.
So yeah, it was a really really weird path. So as we look at the bigger picture and communicating with volunteers, obviously a very important job, but sometimes it's left out of the picture. So what should we consider when communicating with groups of volunteers?
There's a lot of it. Again, build relationships as much as possible. Build some kind of rapport with the volunteers on your team so that they're comfortable coming to you if they're facing a barrier, or if they see something that maybe might work better. You need to have enough of a relationship with them that they're comfortable coming to you, bringing those kind of issues up. Be willing to communicate in different ways. Everybody has a different way of seeing the world. Some people prefer text, people prefer email, some people prefer a phone call. Be willing to be flexible in that, because you want to meet them where they are. They're helping you. So make it easy for them to help you. But communication isn't just about email and phone calls. It's about, like I said, whenever I have a conversation about volunteering, it always comes down to this: build the relationship, right? Because it's all about relationships. It's all about making sure the person who's helping you feels comfortable, feels strong, feels capable, and then they'll give you everything they've got. But you have to have that relationship. And part of that is being able to communicate. Be willing to communicate more than you might think, because nobody wants to spam anyone, but
Hmm.
especially in crisis situations, the more communication, the better. Even if you don't have anything to communicate, say, hey, I still haven't heard back, but I'll let you know as soon as I do, right? Stay in touch all the time, because if they don't hear, they're starting to wonder if something's going on that they don't know about, and is it bad, right? So just be willing to communicate, to over communicate, and even communicate when you don't have anything to say particularly.
Yeah. And I'll just add, like, we work in my business in audience groups. And so the audience group of your volunteers and any subsets below those is a really important audience group to always keep in mind. And reaching them is more challenging in different situations like emergencies. So that sometimes they're not out there and you can't email them and maybe can't even phone them. So you have to think about creative ways to reach them. But keep in mind too that volunteers are on the front line. So they typically are in roles where the public is coming up to them. So keeping them informed keeps the public informed. So it's a double duty there when you are ensuring that good information gets to them. So yeah, that was good information, Karen. And the other side of it is we want to communicate. We want to be thankful for our volunteers and the contributions that they give to us, but it's challenging. As I mentioned earlier, came from firefighting. Some calls don't go well. They're pretty brutal calls, and you still got to keep ready for the next one and get people back there. And so how do you recognize the contributions of volunteers, both those that were known and those that are unknown?
There's a lot of ways to do it. And going by what you've just said, start with taking care of yourself. It's the whole put your own oxygen mask on first, right? Make sure you're in a good spot before you start reaching out. Because if you reach out and you're not in a good space, they're just going to feed off that. Actual appreciation can come in many forms. I kind of talk about 4 appreciation love languages, if you like. And the first one, and the one you should use all the time, is just a general thank you. Say thank you to all your volunteers all the time. If you can be specific, that's even better. So if you, hey, thanks for handling that crisis there. I was tied up and I couldn't get it, and I saw you did it. Well done. You've made everybody so much better off because of it. The more specific you can get, the more they feel it, right? They know that you've seen the difference that they're making. It's kind of like the difference between your partner bringing you flowers on Valentine's Day and bringing you flowers on some random Tuesday, right? The one just feels better, right? Because you know they're thinking about you when they're not supposed to think about you. Right. So that if you can be really specific, that makes a big difference. If you can't, just a general thank you is better than nothing. The second one is kind of what I call tangible gratitude is give something back. It doesn't have to be actual physical something. It could be a $5 coffee card or a pass to an event or whatever. But it could be something like serving as a reference on a job interview for somebody or filling out forms for them for school, things like that. What can you give back? What are the benefits that being volunteering with you, what benefits do they get out of it besides just you did a good thing, so good for you? What tangible, specific things do they get? So if you can try and find things like that, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
If you have their permission, then calls out on social media and public acknowledgement of some sort, whether that's a shout out during a meeting to somebody who's kind of gone over above and beyond or whatever, volunteers of the week or volunteers of the year or whatever. Those kind of awards make some people feel absolutely amazing. Again, you need to know your volunteers. You need to have that relationship because everybody is different. So for example, you want to put me on a stage and thank me, I'm all over that. Yeah, no problem. You try and do that to my husband, he'd crawl under a chair. He wouldn't feel appreciated. He would feel embarrassed, right? So you have to know your volunteers to be able to judge what's appropriate for them. And the last one is the one everybody thinks about appreciation is some big thank you event. Right? Once a year, get all the volunteers together and give them a meal or whatever, dine and dance or something like that. That should be the lowest priority. It's great. That's nice. But I've had so many organizations say, yeah, we held this big event and only 10 of our 150 volunteers showed up, right? It's because most people don't care about it anymore. People don't care so much about swag anymore. They just want to be thanked. They just want to be appreciated. They don't need stuff anymore. But if you do want to hold an event, ask them, what do they want? Do they want a dinner dance or do they want a backyard barbecue?
Mm-hmm.
Try and think of what they want and give them that. And that's more likely to have people show up than you coming up with a great idea and imposing it on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's some ways to show appreciation.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great ways. And I think it's important to have a good suite in your back pocket to pull out and recognize that there are quite differences. And I particularly want to pick on that point about you and your husband. There is a lot of people like that. And I remember years ago had a very major award for a volunteer that we wanted to give to somebody. And they wanted nothing to do with coming to the award ceremony. And it was a real hard thing for my boss to accept that because it was a big award for our organization and they wanted to have stage time for it. But this person that was just not the spot for them. And so I found out that there was like, what would you like? And they said, I would like if we could just have a meal with my coworkers and talk about what I did.
Right.
And so that was kind of cool, right? So they were
Yeah.
passing along a little bit more about who they were and what their background was and trying to get other people involved. So,
Yeah. And
who
you
would have thought
wouldn't
of
have
that?
known it if you hadn't had the relationship and had the connection with them, right?
What is one book, documentary, or resource that you can recommend for those learning about crisis or emergency management? And I'll add volunteer management on there if you want to put something on.
Okay. If we focus on crisis management and things like that, there's a TED Talk that I like. It's just a really short one. It's under 5 minutes by Amy C. Edmondson called How to Lead in a Crisis. Basic practical tips and ideas that really make a difference. So that's one. If you want something on volunteer management for this kind of thing, probably the book I'd recommend the most is From the Top Down, Susan J. Ellis. And it's from managing volunteers from a senior level, like what's important to have in place to make sure that volunteers are engaged effectively and appropriately. So those would be my two for that.
Great, thank you. And so what advice would you give information officers or communicators managing crisis or emergencies that would help them to do their job better?
We covered this in more detail a bit earlier, but streamline things. If you want people to volunteer, make it easy for them. Do things ahead of time if you can. Plan everything out. Don't try and do things ad hoc, but streamline things. Make it as easy as possible for people to come and help right away. Have micro tasks to get people involved set aside, things that don't require training or hoops or police checks or any of that.
And how do you maintain your mental well-being during the most intense moments?
When we talk moments, it isn't really an issue. I am so into the moment that everything else goes by the wayside and I'm just focused right in. When those moments stretch into hours, then I'm someone who takes a walk in the bush or gets away from people. I'm a bit of an introvert. People don't always believe that because I'm very social, but I am an introvert and I need my alone time. So that's what I do is I just get by myself for a bit and try and bring myself down, deep breathing or being in nature or whatever, just to try and slow things down for myself. And I find it really refreshes me so that when I come back, I'm back top of my game.
Great advice. Well, Karen, it's been lovely having you here today to talk about volunteers and volunteer management. Really insightful and good information. We've had some great chats over the years, and certainly people can reach out to you. Your contact information will be there. I'd like to thank you very much for joining me on the Wildfires, Floods, and Chaos Communications podcast, Karen.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we are done. Thank you to Karen Knight for joining me. And here's where you can find out some of those things that she talked about. Head over to communicationspodcast.com for everything. This includes guest information and links, transcripts, images, and show notes, video and audio versions of the podcast, and you can send us reviews and guest ideas. Look, I really appreciate it. I said earlier, it's been a bit of a rough year this past year. So the podcast had to be parked for a bit while we dealt with other things and kept the business rolling. So if you like this episode, you'll want to be tuned in for an upcoming episode with 3 volunteer chiefs from the same fire department that have nearly 150 years of experience just between the 3 of them. So thank you for joining the Wildfires, Floods, and Chaos Communications podcast, a production of Butterfly Effect Communications. We are masters of doom and gloom, bringing calm to chaos. Goodbye. Hear me later.